first time ever, we are so proud to say that this video has been generously sponsored by A Wolf Asunder by Jeremy Newton. You can follow the story of a young wolf betrayed by everything he's ever known, and we really hope that you take a minute to go check out this amazing book. Honestly, I have not purchased it yet, but I'm about to, and from the reviews that I've seen of it, it's actually pretty good. So very excited to get started on this book and really dig into it. But thank you so much, Jeremy Newton. It means a lot to have my first sponsored video, and I really, really appreciate it. Anyways, on to the main video. Now, before you get started on any aspect of fursuit making, buying, or what have you, the first thing you need to have set in stone is a budget. You need to know how much you can reasonably spend while still taking account into all the other factors you have going on in your life. While you might have $6,000 in the bank, if your rent monthly and the cost of living in your area is high enough that buying something like a full suit for $3,000 is damn near impossible, keep that in mind. While it might be really, really, really tempting to go all in on a fully decked out fursuit, your budget might not allow for it. Now, the worst thing any maker can encounter is someone who has to force refund because they didn't foresee their budgeting issues up front. So if you're going to use a maker, make sure your budgets are rock solid. If you're going to make it yourself and you kind of goof the budgets, you're a little more flexible because you're controlling the entire process yourself. But before you get anywhere in actually going into the fursuit process, set aside the exact amount that you can comfortably spend without blowing through your food, electrical, school, rent, or any other expenses that you have month to month. So one thing you are definitely going to need for a fursuit is a really solid ref sheet, something that shows the front, the back, and ideally the side of your character. Now, some artists are okay to work with no side view, but if you can get it, definitely recommend it. Now, if you're like me and you're kind of drawing impaired, having a professional artist work on this is a really great option. And like I said in the previous segment, for budgeting, make sure your budget allows for it. If you have a max spend of, say, $1,500, but you really can't draw, make sure you take into account the amount of money you're going to be spending on that ref sheet. Another thing you're going to need to keep in mind is what kind of fursuit do you want? Some people prefer partials to full suits. For me, it came down to budget. I would love a full suit of Cupcake, but with my monthly expenses, paying that amount for the maker I wanted was just flat out impossible at the time. So I opted for partial. Now, there's a couple different versions of partial depending on what maker you choose or if you make it yourself. But what you're going to want to factor in here is, what makes you feel the most comfortable and what fits in your budget. Maybe eventually you want to get one of those $10,000 full suits, but you might want to wait if your budget really doesn't support it. If that is your end goal, the best route is to start saving now and work up to that, as opposed to trying to blow it all in one go. But if you're perfectly fine with a partial and it's in your range and you want to commission it, do it. Totally fine. Now, if you're making it yourself, this is a little trickier. If you're not comfortable making certain parts of the suit, it's totally okay to commission a maker to make those parts for you. Just work out that cost in your budget, and I'm sure you'll find the right fit for you. Now, the biggest debate in the fandom, do you buy your fursuit or do you make your fursuit? Full disclosure, I bought both my suits. I don't know about you, but I can't sew a stitch, and I do not have a living situation that would support the kind of production needs of making a suit myself. However, if you want to cut costs and make something a little more efficiently, making a suit definitely helps with that. But if you have a look you want and you know an artist that can bang out that look perfectly, it might be worth saving some money up so you can get your dream character from the get-go. Whatever you choose, just make sure you're financially able to support it so that if you get into trouble, you can kind of work around it. Now, the difficulties with making a suit is you're heavily relying on tutorials and the experience of others to make it, whereas if you buy, you're pretty much paying for the experience that maker has. It's up to you which one you want to do, but again, choose whatever you feel most comfortable with and really just fits your budget. Now, no matter which road you choose, you do need to measure yourself. Measure your head, measure your feet. Make sure you know the actual dimensions of your body, especially if you're getting a bodysuit. If you're going to be getting a bodysuit from a maker, be aware that duct tape dummies have to be provided from almost every maker that I can think of from memory. What a duct tape dummy allows you to do is exactly sculpt the bodysuit based on that actual person's proportion and sizing. You might know that when you go into a clothing store and you know you're a size 8, that clothing store may not fit you because of the way your body contours work. A fursuit is no different. So if you're going to be making it yourself, take measurements, and if you're going to be commissioning a maker and you want a full suit, definitely provide a duct tape dummy. Now, if you're making it yourself, a duct tape dummy is actually pretty helpful because you can mark out on the duct tape where you need to cut and pattern. So just be aware that, if you're going to be paying for someone else or doing it yourself, exact measurements are a must. Now, to make a fursuit, you're going to need quite a few supplies. I could easily tell you what you'll need, but I don't make fursuits, so based on whatever you want to achieve, you might need different supplies. Now, you can get really great kits from makers like Dream Vision, and you can get bases from a whole bunch of different makers, but depending on what you want to achieve, it may not meet that need. One YouTuber who does an immensely incredible job on helping beginner makers is Sparky Can Do. So if you are thinking of making your own suit and you really don't know where to start, please go check out Sparky Can Do. Another great resource is actually looking at Monoyasha, the wonderful person who created Dream Vision Creations. While they do sell a lot of kits now, and I don't think they make suits anymore, they are definitely a bomb resource for figuring stuff out on your own. Additionally, most makers won't give away trade secrets, but if you have questions on simple sewing tips, most makers will give you a hint or two. So if you're like me and you really can't sew, you might be aiming for buying a fursuit. There's a couple of options here. You could commission a maker to make your custom character, or if you're looking for a fursuit right now, you can always go to Dealer's Den or Furbuy and try to get something that's already been made. Now, the folly in this is it's not custom to your body, so you might have some fit issues, but most makers are pretty happy to work with you to resolve those. But if you are going to commission a maker, there's a few things you definitely need to do. First of all, research them. Research the ever-loving piss out of them, because you want to make sure that both their style of suit and their style of work meets your need. This is something I've definitely goofed up in the past with on different projects, not fursuit related, and it's come to bite me in the butt. If anyone remembers me before I made this channel very public, you'll remember the Jan rave outfit, which was an absolute disaster. But if you are going to commission a maker, make sure you have a ref sheet. If you need a duct tape dummy, you have one of those. And make sure anything you don't feel comfortable with or have allergies to, or anything that could inhibit the actual process, is on the table from the get-go. If you're under the age of 18, make sure that maker is okay with working with you. Do not lie, and this is important. If you are below the age that they are willing to work with, just wait until you're of age. Trust me, it makes the whole process so much more seamless and so much less stressful. And honestly, I know you're probably itching for a suit, but it is incredibly frustrating for makers to deal with people who are under the age of 18 if that's not what they prefer to work with, because it comes with a host of complications that I've talked about in other issues, not the least of which being they have to then worry about the payment method, and if you're not 18, is it really your card you're using, or is there a chance they might get a forced refund from your mom? Not fun. So if that's an issue, definitely wait or talk to your parents about potentially making one. Now, if you're also going to commission makers, a good thing to look at is all their social profiles. If something they believe in or express strong opinions on isn't something you want to be aligned with, now is the chance to know that before you put down money. Something that happened recently in the community is Mythical Creatures had a fiery tweet storm and subsequent clusterfuck, sorry younger viewers, that essentially made it very, very uncomfortable for anyone who had previously bought suits from them or was considering it. Essentially, they tweeted a whole host of things that could fly in the range of insensitive to potentially homophobic to just plain rude. So if you don't want to be associated with a maker who has a tendency to be a little edgy or have views that you don't agree with, if that's something you value, figure that out before you give them your money. Also, a great thing to look at is, if you want a certain maker but they are not open for commissions, do yourself a favor, and if they have any way to sign up for or subscribe to, or basically get you auto alerts when they do open for commissions, do it. If you are dead set on getting that one suit by that one very exclusive maker, be prepared to wait. It will probably take a while. They are usually in high demand for the quality of their suits and the notoriety of their suits, so if you're willing to wait, go for it. But if you're not, consider looking at smaller makers who have a little bit less notoriety in the fandom and supporting some of those up-and-comers, as they will probably have a more open commission queue, but they might have a little bit of lapse in experience. You kind of get a trade-off there. Some can sew just as well as the made-for-you and Autumn Fallings of the world, and some are just figuring it out. So, depending on what you're comfortable with and depending on what you want, you might be able to find a happy medium. I certainly did with Cupcake. So keep all of that in mind when you go to buy a fursuit. Now, regardless if you make or buy, the first thing you need to do once you've settled on the style, what you want, and exactly how you want it, make a budgeting plan. What do I mean by that? So if you have decided that the maximum amount of money you can spend total is, let's give you a big number just to make you feel good, $6,000, and the fursuit you want is $6,000, great. Now, with most people that live in places with higher rent, or people who are still paying off student loans or have a lot of expenditures to get through, you may not be able to drop all $6,000 in one go. That's actually extremely normal in today's day and age, with tons of students incurring debt all the damn time because of how prolific it is, at least in our country, the USA. If you're abroad, I don't really know. But if you can't pay $6,000 in one go, what you're going to want to look at is a budgeting plan. There's two ways to go about this. If the reason you can't pay $6,000 in one go is because of your spending on non-essential items, consider cutting back on that expenditure so you can pay it in one go. If that's not really an option, and the reason that you can't pay it in one go is because you have essential bills you have to pay, try to see what options that maker has with payment plans. One thing that really irks me is when certain makers do not accept any form of payment plan. The reason being is your average human who works a very standard job with hourly pay often cannot afford to drop something higher than $5,000 in one sitting. It's just a fact of life. So if you're in that bucket of people who just really cannot be dropping that level of funds, try to figure out an exact schedule and payment system and plan that will line you up for exactly meeting that maker's needs. If that means paying $300 a month and setting down 50% of deposit when you start, do that. But work with the maker so it's something that they can also accomplish. Certain makers also use this as their lifeblood. So while you might be paying them $6,000 for a suit, if you're only paying like $100 a month, that may not be sustainable for them. So just be mindful of that as well. While it may seem like they're being greedy, they're not. This is what pays their bills and keeps food on their table. So try to be sensitive to that when you're working out plans with your maker. If something comes up and you can't make a payment, tell that maker well in advance of that happening, and if by any good chance you're able to pay a little bit double one month, tell them. Goodness knows that's more money in their pocket, and having open communication is super, super effective with stuff like this. Now, if you're going to be making it yourself, the same thing applies. Understand how much you can realistically spend on each of the materials that you will need. You may only have enough to make the head when you start, and if you want to do a full bodysuit, that may have to be a long-term endeavor. You may have to save up for more fur, for more foam. If you goof up the eyes your first time, you might need to get replacement eye blanks. It's a little bit more fluid, but you are in more control, but just understand you might need to actually flight out how much you need to spend per month to get that thing made in a way that doesn't bankrupt you and make you have to sell the suit because you're broke, but also kind of gives you enough time to learn in between and comfortably go about building your suit. If all you can manage one month is a tail, just, be realistic with yourself. You probably can't bang out a full suit in 1 month if you've never done it before, and your credit card may not be able to support that. So just be realistic with yourself, make a plan, figure out how much each item could conceivably cost in terms of materials and hours of work, and just set a budget for yourself for about how much you can do at a time reasonably and, within your budget, as I keep harping on because that's important. So we can't really talk about fursuits and buying fursuits without talking about scams and bewares, because unfortunately in the community, that tends to be our blood, sweat, and tears, is trying to figure out who we can buy from, why we can buy from them, and if we're going to get what we expect. While I will say most fursuit makers are not out to scam you out of your money, there are definitely some bad eggs in our community. One thing you can do to protect yourself is try to read up on makers and see if there have been past instances of issues. And one suggestion I can make is try to ensure that payments are through a secure service like something similar to PayPal or Venmo, although Venmo's not usually the best go-to. With something like PayPal, if a maker asks you to pay as friends and family rather than goods and services, that should be an initial red flag. For me personally, whenever I sell adoptables or what have you, I tend to do friends and family only because I'm not really that professional, and usually I will not ask you to pay until I've sent you the finished one, or, if I trust you enough, I'll let you pay first. But the thing about fursuit makers in our community is we tend to be pretty stricken with scammers, which is bizarre. And it sucks. I've seen countless instances on both sides. Essentially, fursuit makers going to sell suits and then getting scammed out of money, either from forced refunds or from underage users trying to purchase something and their parents freaking out and canceling the charge because they don't know what it is. It's a mess. So some things you can do to protect yourself is try to research that maker until you are blue in the face, read every review that you can, and try to ask people for their 2 cents. Sometimes what happens is you'll have a maker who has a style that really isn't compatible with what you want. And when I say style, I don't mean the way the fursuit looks, I mean the way they work. So someone like Eno probably has a crap ton of commissions in a year, and whereas with a smaller maker, it may be very, very unusual to wait up to a year to 2 years for a suit might be completely normal for them. So what you may perceive as a scam is really just a case of you commissioned one of the most popular makers in the fandom, and yeah, there's a list, and yeah, you might be at the bottom of it. And that's normal. But in cases where there's outright scams, just really be careful. If you're buying through a service like Dealer's Den or Furbuy, typically the staff there will be very, very flexible in trying to identify scams and where they happen and try to help you out in terms of sorting out an issue. I have heard of a couple people essentially posting bids, speaking to the person posting, and then realizing something is critically wrong. If at any point during a transaction something doesn't feel right, phone a friend, try to see if this is something they've experienced before, and just protect yourself, because there is nothing worse than watching your dream suit go down the toilet because of some really bizarre issue. This is also why I say that keeping in communication with makers is critical. If they are unwilling to regularly talk to you about the progress of your suit, that should be an immediate red flag. Even if it's just an update of when materials arrive or, what the status of your suit is, they should at least either have a Trello or some kind of updating service that tells you where you are in the process, that lets you know that, your suit is actually being made. Outright scams are, of course, the absolute worst and the most horrifying to deal with, and I genuinely hope no one ever has to deal with it. But if you get in a situation where a maker has put you in a corner and you know for a fact that you are involved in a pretty horrific scam, just try to get as much evidence as you can, especially if you've made payments through a service like PayPal or have written email conversations. Now, I say email conversations because typically if you have paid through goods or services, PayPal's customer service team is usually pretty badass at helping you sort it out. I hear a lot of makers griping about the fact that PayPal typically force refunds and sides with customers more than they do with the makers themselves. Now, there's a very critical reason for that. While it may seem unfair and unpleasant to endure a forced refund, sometimes it's necessary. If a fursuit maker has left you completely in the dust and it seems spent through whatever you paid them for your suit, whether it be for legitimate or illegitimate reasons, understandably you're probably going to freak out. Now, if you don't get updates for a while and they completely go MIA with your money, it makes sense that it may be time to refund or execute some kind of emergency strategy. Thankfully, I have not had to do that with either of my suits. The maker of Heli was quite young when I commissioned, but I understood that one of the key reasons I chose them is because the money would be funding their education and their future, and because I knew they were younger, I knew that they had to contend with things like schoolwork, applying for colleges, and what have you, and I was a little bit more lenient on communication because I was getting very, very regular updates, and I had a very well-scheduled delivery for Heli. So, Barking Mad Suits, kudos to you. You were literally a dream to work with, and I definitely plan to work with you again in the future. With Cupcake, the maker there did have some life complications, so having regular communication during that time was critical because I didn't hear from them for a while, but having them reconnect and explain the situation was immensely helpful and definitely helped to, kind of help me understand what was going on, why things were being delayed a bit, and it made the entire process much more comfortable. I am a very reactionary buyer. If something doesn't come on time, I do flip out. So having that kind of communication really, really helps. Now, if you think you are the target of a scam and you have paid through a way that is really, really hard to get money back on, say money transfer, or cash. I really don't recommend cash ever, but if you get in that situation, just try to get as much evidence as you can drummed up in the event that you have to pursue some kind of legal action. It sucks, but if you have put down like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, maybe even $4,000 or $5,000, and you've kind of been left in the dust, it may be worth pursuing some legal action, because obviously that money has not gone towards your suit, and if the maker is not going to complete the order that you had properly commissioned, it might be time to reevaluate things and get yourself out of there and try to get your money back. So try to avoid scams as much as you can. Okay, so these are just my quick and easy tips on how to get a fursuit. Obviously, I'm not saying you have to have a fursuit if you're a furry, but I know it's a pretty strong interest in the community for a lot of people. So I hope these were just some helpful tips to get you started. If you have any more questions relating specifically to buying a fursuit and the process, I've only actually commissioned 2. So if anyone in the comments has bought more than 3, 4, 5 fursuits and you're willing to lend some expertise and, experience here, just comment below and let people talk to you about your experience. If you have experience making fursuits and you want to help people in the comments who don't have much experience, same thing. Comment in the description, comment below like what your experience is and how you can help people, and if you're willing to give some people some tips, hey man, do it. All for learning on this channel. If you have any questions about buying a fursuit and sizing and duct tape dummies and really any of that, like I said, Dream Vision Creations and Sparky Can Do are super great resources for that and have a lot of informational material. But if you're still really confused, comment below, and I know a lot of my people who subscribe here either have experience with fursuits, some have experience with fursuit making, and some have a mix of the two, so I'm sure someone can answer your question in the comments. Anyways, have a great week, you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! And again, please don't forget to check out A Wolf Asunder. Thank you so much, Jeremy Newton, for sponsoring this video. And remember, guys, you are always welcome to sponsor videos if you would like. Good night!